of year, we're traditionally finalizing our preparation for our Citizens Business Summit. But as most of you know, I think most of you know, that we have elected to cancel our summit for 2020. You know, honestly, we're a little bit stubborn in working towards a cancellation. This event is something we actually like to do in the bank and feel like as though it fits everything a community bank needs to do for the communities it serves. Our bank does 2 events per year. We have a Citizens Charity Classic every spring. And after some postponement this year, we managed to get it in mid-July. And we were thankful to have the largest crowd we'd ever had, and also blessed to be able to write the biggest check to the Fellowship of Christian Athletes that we had ever written. So thank you for those of you that supported our Charity Classic. It went well because of you. Traditionally, after the Charity Classic ends, our summit preparation begins. But as we progressed through this year, we realized we had some challenges with gathering a large group. We had challenges in speakers, logistics, and speaker travel. And over time, we came to realize that we perhaps had a challenge with our venue if something were to pop up near the summit that made it unable for us to complete it. So ultimately, it became clear that canceling the summit for this year was the right thing to do. But no, the summit is important to us. We're small businesses just like many of you. And like you, 2020 has been a challenging year for the bank. And I'm sure it's been challenging for many of us. But sometimes I think the only option is to push ahead. And I think that's what all of us are doing. You know, within the bank, we were pleased to operate and be truly active in the PPP program. It was strange sometimes. We had limited staff. We had people working at home, just like many of you have. And we've been through a round or 2 of lobby closings and reopenings during this year thus far. But more than anything, I think our bank has done a great job of serving. Couldn't be more proud of the bank family. We've worked together and pulled together. And I think, you know, in the face of a different business year, we've done very well. I also want to mention that the support of our communities of the bank during this time have been great. We've been truly honored by the feedback and the support we've received. We've been flattered, and it's validated a lot of things that we think we're trying to do as an organization. So I want to thank you for that as well. But shortly after our decision to cancel, an idea surfaced that we may not simply cancel, but we may leave behind something this year in place of us all getting together. And one of the things that arose as an idea was the opportunity to have a general economic overview. And we decided to take that and run with it. Now, last year, our summit featured Dr. Loren Scott as a speaker, and we reached out to Loren and asked him if he would accept some questions from us and answer them. And we gathered a group of questions that we thought were important to us and also important to what we felt our traditional audience might want to hear. And he was very gracious in agreeing to do so. Know that Hurricane Laura has been through close to Loren's backyard, and we didn't know if we would get this in today, but we're thankful that he's well and that we have this opportunity to do this. A brief bio: Dr. Scott started his career at Louisiana State University as an assistant professor. He rose to the level of receiving the prestigious Freeport-McMoran Endowed Chair of Economics and became the director of the Division of Economic Development and Forecasting. For 13 years, he was the chairman of the economics department at LSU and now serves in a professor emeritus capacity. He's currently the president of Loren C. Scott and Associates, an economic consulting firm. Loren is an energy expert. He has clients that include BP, Capital One Financial, Exxon Mobil, Chesapeake Energy, and a tiny little bank named JP Morgan Chase. You've probably seen his work, or you may have published in the Wall Street Journal or other business publications. Dr. Scott received 7 different awards for outstanding classroom teaching while at LSU. And those of you that have heard Dr. Scott before understand why this is, but we're happy to have him even if he's not here in person. We asked him real quickly to address a couple of issues: the general strength of our economy and the general outlook, what interest rates might look like, the outlook for unemployment, his thoughts on the impact of COVID, and not just now, but into the future, housing and manufacturing, and even his thoughts on the election. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Scott. He's an engaging and informative speaker, and I know you will enjoy it.
Well, thank you, Charlie. It is a bummer not getting to come to your area of Alabama. Again, I had a great time there last year. Enjoyed being with the other bank folks and really meeting all the people there in Gutterville. That was a real treat for me, and I really hate that wasn't able to come back again this year, be there in person. So let me get right to it here. Share the screen here. And this is, what we're going to do is kind of talk about some of the issues that Charlie brought up. And I thought this you would appreciate this. I think this is the way most of us feel. This is a great cartoon, I think, that captures what it's been like to be in this shelter-in-place thing we've been through recently. Are we purchasing school clothes or more alcohol in August? I'm just asking that for a friend. All right, what I want to do is to take you back to January of this past year and look at some forecasts. Notice these forecasts for January 20. And these are the forecasts I showed you last year. Wells Fargo has a very fine economics department. You still want to bank with Citizens Bank, but Wells Fargo has a fine economics department. And then Consensus Forecast USA is an average of about 28 different forecasting firms in the country. And so if you look what is above the screen line, you see what had already happened at that point. And we were in our 128th month of economic growth, the longest growth period in the history of modern history of our country, really in the history of our country. And as people look forward, as you can see, both of these groups looking forward did not think this was going to end. They thought we're going to have kind of a crummy first quarter of 2020. You see an asterisk beside that number, mainly because of Boeing not building their big jet airplane they were having problems with. And that was going to take about a half a percentage point off of real gross domestic product. But the president had just worked out phase one of the trade deal with China. And everybody was saying, hey, man, this boom period is going to keep going. The only thing that can stop us is some sort of external exogenous shock, some shock from the outside. Well, hello, we got a shock from the outside that changed everything. Back in January, if I've been looking at the Alabama economy, this is a picture of employment in the Alabama economy from 1990 through some forecasts for 2020. I mean, we were, you guys had just come out of a very tough recession, what we call the Great Recession at the national level. You had lost about 6.8% of your jobs versus 6.1% for the national economy. Been really tough on you primarily because your automobile industry. But by 2017, you climbed back out of it. And the way things were going, gosh, we were thinking this year you would add about 25,000 jobs. It'd be a good growth year for Alabama. Well, then we got the exogenous shock. And for those of you who are Ole Miss graduates, this is a map of the United States of America. And what it shows here is the confirmed COVID-19 cases as of mid-August. And of course, the darker the red area, the worse. And so the worst areas have been, in terms of sheer numbers, have been California and Texas and Florida and New York, et cetera. But here's Alabama, or right in the middle of that. And kind of not in the top group, but having quite a few cases, as it turns out. If you kind of look at a map that shows the cases per 1,000 people by county, what you will find is that Alabama, statewide, about 136 people per 1,000. Marshall County is much, much lower than that. Here you are right in this area here. The darker the area, the worse, and you're in a pretty good spot there. Only 19 per 1,000 person. So it's per 100,000. It's not based on population size. So this is an indication that you have not been hit nearly as badly as the state as a whole has been hit. Now, what I want to do is to show you some COVID impacts by region and by industry. And we'll look at some unemployment insurance data to start out with, but what I want to really focus on is what has happened to your employment numbers as a result of COVID coming in. Again, a map of the United States that shows the continuing claims for unemployment insurance as a percent of your February labor force. Okay, so this is adjusted for each one of the states. And you'll notice that the state that I'm in, Louisiana, is one of the hardest hit states in terms of claims, people submitting claims for unemployment insurance. California and Nevada, and I think New York was right in there with us. But, you know, Alabama, relatively low. I mean, which is an indication that, again, your state is not quite hit nearly as hard job-wise as the rest of the country. And I think you're going to see that show up in some data that I can show you in a moment. When you look at the employment numbers, these are the employment hits that you took in the worst month of all. That was the month of April. That was the first month in which the economy was basically shut down for the entire month. Your unemployment rate rose to 13.8%. You'll notice that that's almost a full percentage point below what the U.S. economy was. But the key thing is to look at employment. And boy, this is a tough number. You lost almost 200,000 jobs in the month of April, a drop of about 9.6%. When you look at the areas, the different sectors of the economy, the worst hit by far, and this is true not only in your state, but also in Louisiana, was the leisure and the hospitality area. This is going to be where your restaurants, your hotels are, where your convention work is. So especially down at Orange Beach, this is going to be a major factor there. This was a sector that was hit the hardest, dropping 41% of their jobs. In Louisiana, this was 45%, but we also have a very large casino industry that was shut down for 3 straight months. But you can see it was this was the area that was hit the hardest. Now, if you look around this number, look directly below it at the other services, this was another sector hit much harder than the state as a whole. Again, the state as a whole, 9.6, other services, 12.8. And this, of course, is the area that includes your beauty salons, your barbershops. And you know what we're all doing during the month of April? We were getting shaggy. This is also where your repair shops are. Most of these places pretty much completely shut down. One of the things that surprised me is the one right above the box, and that's the healthcare and social services area. I would have thought, hey, we're having a pandemic. The healthcare sector of all of them will be the one that grows. Well, as it turns out, it was not the one that grew. It got hit pretty hard. And the primary reason for that is you folks put off going to the clinics, going to your individual doctors. You put off elective surgery. You were basically afraid of the hospital. You didn't want to go there for fear of getting COVID. And so the healthcare sector really took a lick. And it's a sector that, as you'll see in a moment, has really not come back that well. If you look at what has happened since April now, the latest numbers we have are for July. And what I have in this middle column is what has happened to employment in July relative to July of the previous year. Now, again, look what happened to your unemployment rate. Your unemployment rate has come down substantially. It's come down from 3.8 to 8.2. The U.S. unemployment rate is still 2.5 percentage points above where you folks are. So you're doing much better than the rest of the country. Now, if you kind of look at how much you've improved by July, your job loss was down to 101, almost 102,000, which means you had a 49% improvement already in July. I want you to kind of take that 49% and put it in the back of your head, write it down on the side for just a minute, because I'm going to come back to that. There were 2 sectors that got worse during this time period. Before I get to them, the one sector down here that got way worse was the government sector. The government sector went from losing 500 jobs to losing 14,300. That was primarily in local governments. Of course, local governments have to have a balanced budget, so they started laying off people right away. And this is state government. Federal government pretty much stayed constant during this time period. Let me go back. Got away from this a little bit. I want to show you this other one up here at the top that's also continued to lose jobs. Not very many. This is not a big industry in your economy at all. This is really where oil and gas extraction is. This is deteriorated. between April and July, it's deteriorated like crazy in Texas and Louisiana, big energy states. Now, the other thing I wanted to show you, again, remember the 49% improvement statewide? Look at these two sectors down here. Look at the healthcare sector. Healthcare sector only improved 21%. The business and professional services area only recovered 38%, 11 percentage points lower. Now, professional business services is where your engineers are. This is where your attorneys are, your CPAs. I mean, a lot of this sector has not come back very well, especially the engineering side. A lot of projects during the COVID were postponed or they were slowed down. And as a result, the engineering side really took a hit. So kind of remember, again, that these two sectors were slow to come back, because that's going to impact what we say about your area. Now, there are in your state several what the Bureau of Economic Analysis calls MSAs, Metropolitan Statistical Areas. You are not in one. Here, Marshall County is in what we call a rural area. All these yellow areas are rural. And you're right in between some big ones here. You border on to Gadsden and Huntsville, and then a little bit with Birmingham down here in Decatur. And so we don't have a lot of really good data at all, timely data on Marshall. But what we do have is timely data on what's going on right around you, which we know is impacting you. And so the next thing I wanted to show you was to look at the metropolitan areas in the state, break it down by geographic areas. So let's go back again to April. And in April, again, here you see the total loss in the state was at 200,000 or so, close to 200,000 number, down 9.6%. And then what you can see for all the different metropolitan areas, what the job losses were like. And so in Huntsville, not too much in the way of tourism, convention business, not too much of that. A lot of federal government, and that was an area that held up. And so the Huntsville area did not get hit as bad as the rest of the state. But if you look at Gadsden, Gadsden really got hit a lot worse than the rest of the state. Now, Gadsden is not one of the bigger MSAs by any stretch of the imagination. And absolute job losses, it's really the second, the second lowest in the state. But in percentage terms, it was a big hit. And we're going to get to why that is in just a second. Then if you look at let's look at the improvement that took place between April, the worst month, and the latest month for which we have data, and that is July. Again, the top line is that state number, 49% improvement. And then if you start looking across the state, here is Gadsden. Look at Gadsden. Gadsden, half of the improvement of the rest of the state. We'll see why that is the case in just a moment. And then Huntsville is not quite as far returning back, still got back 41% of their jobs, but it's still not as good as the state as a whole. Now, so the question is, why did those two areas perform not quite as good as the rest of the state? And to answer that question, one of the things I did was to look at the state level and look at these 5 sectors: leisure, hospitality, manufacturing, health education, professional services, and federal government. And you can see that at the state level, about 10% of the jobs are in leisure, about 13% in manufacturing, 12% in healthcare, 12% professional services. And I don't know why this should not be 0. That should be a very small number, but it's not 0%. It's like 0.5%. However, when you look at Huntsville, look at this red number. In professional services, 24% of their jobs is in professional services. And if you think about the makeup of Huntsville, it's not going to be surprising that there's a lot of engineers associated with that. Well, you remember that professional services was one of the slowest sectors of the economy to return. And so because Huntsville is heavily weighted in that hurt them. Now, they are also very heavily weighted in federal government, which helped. That's what got, even though this was they were twice as big as the rest of the state in terms of professional services to bring them down. That was offset a little bit by the fact they're also heavily into federal government. So that helped offset that a little bit. So you got a little closer to that 49% number. But in Gadsden, the big red number is this one right here. That's that health. It's that 21%, a fifth of the jobs in the Gadsden MSA are in the healthcare area, healthcare/education, primarily healthcare. And again, that is a sector that really has not come back. It had only come back about 21%, and you got a fifth of your jobs in that area. Well, that's one of the reasons that Gadsden metropolitan area has not improved as much as the state as a whole. I thought you would appreciate this. Was a survey taken. Are you drinking more during the lockdown? And here was this person's answer. I thought that was a clever one. Now, you haven't had full recovery of the jobs. That is coming. But one of the things you need to watch is what happens when we get the numbers for August. Because if you recall, all the way through July, people who were unemployed could file for unemployment insurance and get not only the base amount they would get in Alabama, but another $600. Okay? And they got that extra $600 added on. And as a result, this is what I call the supplemental unemployment insurance payment. Let me show you how important this is. What you'll discover is that if you look at the average, what the state weekly unemployment insurance benefit is, plus the $600 as a share of the average weekly wage, what you're going to find is that about 5 of 6 unemployed people during this time period were making more money being unemployed and getting their weekly amount plus the $600 than they were if they were working. And here is Alabama up here where some of your people were really making a whole lot more money than they were if they were working. And so I think that's one of the things that slowed down the recovery in the workforce. A lot of people were incentivized not to go back to work. I know it's hard to get somebody to feel sympathetic about anybody at a golf club, but at our golf club, we typically could start teeing off about 7:30 in the morning. Well, now we can't tee off until about 9 o'clock in the morning because instead of having 15 people to mow the grounds and get them ready for play, we only had 8. And the reason for that is the others didn't want to come back because they could make more money being unemployed. And notice what this did, what this extra $600 did. This is from 2013 through the present time period. If you look at the dark line, the blue line is tracking what the employee compensation was. And look at the big drop in employee, oops, let me back up, sorry a minute. Look what happened to this big drop in employee compensation initially. And then if you take that same number and add to it the unemployment benefits, look what happened to this number. I mean, a lot of people were making a whole lot more than they were before. So you ended up with a number was way higher than the trend. And so the real question here is, now that this 600 number has been dropped substantially, are we going to see a noticeable increase in people going back to work simply because the incentive to stay unemployed is not so strong anymore? That's going to be something really interesting to see when the August numbers come out. Now, what is going to happen going forward? And that's kind of the key thing. We're all tired of this. And so what I want to do is to go back to those same 2 groups who are making forecasts in August. And what you see in green is what has already happened. What you see in red is what has already happened. This shows you how bad the first 2 quarters of 2020, the first half of 2020 was. Now, to give you an idea about this 31.7% number, a number that was revised and just revised this morning down a little bit from 32.9 to 31.7. The Bureau of Economic Analysis and the U.S. Department of Commerce that collects the data on real gross domestic product has been collecting quarterly data for 73 years. So that's about almost 300 quarters. The worst quarter ever in our 73-year history was in the first quarter of 1958 when real gross domestic product fell 10%. This is 3 times worse. So this was the mother of all drops in real gross domestic product. Now, as you can see, both of these groups are saying we're in the midst of a really good quarter coming back now. Not all the way back, but coming back. And the data that we're getting already on home sales, on retail sales, et cetera, they are unusually good in July, and I suspect they're going to be unusually good in August, primarily because you remember that spike in compensation? People have extra money to spend. Car sales, you'll see in a minute, are doing very, very well right now. So this third quarter is coming back. If you look at this recovery in the third and fourth quarter, the second half of the year, basically what they're saying is that by the end of this year, we'll get back about 72% of the loss that we occurred in the first half. We're not going to get it all back. This is not going to be a V recovery. This is going to be a Nike swoosh recovery. Nike swoosh, goes down and then heads out, doesn't come straight back up. And so think about that for a minute. Remember I told you a while ago, remember the 49% number? Your employment is already back 49% in just about 2 months after the shutdown. So already you're on a good track to get back 72% of yours already. Now you'll notice the slowdown in the numbers as you get into 2021. Actually, if you average these numbers, you'll find that it's somewhere here, somewhere in the fourth quarter of 2021 or the first quarter of 2022, we will finally get all the jobs that we lost. I mean, the economy will be back to where it was in the fourth quarter of 19. So it's more of a Nike swoosh than a V. And so that's kind of what they're expecting. Now, I will tell you that there is a great deal of uncertainty around these forecasts. Again, there are about 28 firms that generate these numbers in the consensus column. When they look at their average for 2020, historically, if we'd have done this back in January, the very first chart we started out with, when the economy was just kind of plugging along, the difference between the worst, the person that thought we were going to do the worst, and the person that thought we were going to do best was usually a difference of like 1 percentage point. Look at the difference. Look at the difference now. The difference between minus 3.3 and minus 6.8% net growth for 2020. That's just a reflection of how uncertain folks are about what is going to happen next. And again, into 2021 will still be about 3% below the peak we reached back here. So again, Nike swoosh instead of a V. Now, what are these uncertainties? What is the uncertainty behind that makes it especially difficult to make these forecasts? Of course, the most important thing is we've never been through something like this before. We've never had an economy that was shut down mainly because the government did it, said stay at home. We've never had an economy that's fallen this fast ever in our history. We've never had a decline in the economy that's been led by the service sector. Usually that's the stable sector of the economy. This time it was the one that took us down. But there's 2 other key ones that I know that everybody who's listening to this knows what it is. And one of those is, are we going to get a vaccine? How soon are we going to get a vaccine? The folks at McKinsey, a very fine consulting, national consulting firm, international consulting firms, had a piece they put out in the latter part of July on this. And I'm not going to read all this, but basically what they are saying is there's never been a time when more money was thrown at a problem or at a virus than has been thrown at this one. And so they are looking at some of the timelines on the trials, the clinical studies, and they think that we're probably going to have something by either the fourth quarter of this year or the first quarter of next year. That would be amazing, because if you look, the fastest that we've ever developed a vaccine for a novel vaccine was for the mumps, and that took 4 stinking years to do. So we got to get the vaccine. We got to be able to distribute it. As you can see, the manufacturers have already announced that they have the capacity to do 1 billion doses by the end of this year and 9 billion by 2021. So there's some really hopeful things out there about the vaccine, but there's also a huge amount of uncertainty. And that's going to have a lot to do with when you folks are ready to go out and be in the general population close to folks. In a restaurant that's at 90% of capacity, for example. Now, the other major uncertainty is the presidential election. This is going to be a very interesting one because it's going to come down to a choice, as I mentioned to you when I was with you last year, between a party that wants to really focus on growth and a party that wants to focus more on fairness. And I understand the fairness issue, but when there was that focus on it, the last time when the Obama administration was in charge for 8 years, we had the slowest growth of real gross domestic product that we've ever had, primarily because there was a focus on raising taxes, trying to get things more fair, major increase in regulations, again, to try to make things more fair. But both of those things increase the cost curves for firms, which causes them to produce less and hire fewer people. And so, presidential candidate Biden has already put out his tax platform, and it is a lot of tax increases, which means there's going to be a lot of cost curves that shift upward, and that's a lot of people that aren't going to be hired and a lot of output that's not going to be produced. You may end up, quote, fair, but you're going to end up with a lot less growth. So this is going to be a very important presidential election, and our forecasts just have to take that into account. I think it's going to be very close, and it can go one way or the other in terms of real gross domestic product. By the way, on these COVID stats, some of you have been getting a little concerned about the quality of the COVID stats. I thought I'd tell you a COVID tale. This wife says, excuse me, did I get fat during the quarantine? And her husband said, you weren't really skinny to begin with. The time of death was 11 p.m. and the cause was COVID. So that's how sometimes this number gets a little bit exaggerated. Now, Charlie mentioned the mortgage interest rates. I thought I'd talk to you just a little bit about what's going on the interest rate side. And I'm going to start with this picture of mortgage interest rates. And I want to kind of remind you of something I shared with you last year. And that is, let's start with this unbelievable peak back here. Now, this is the 30-year fixed mortgage rate. If I put the prime rate here, the prime rate here in 1981 got up to 21.5%. 21.5%. Why did the prime rate get that high in the 81, and why have interest rates fallen so much over time? And to understand that, let's look at the components of the interest rate. Excuse me. If I go to Charlie and say, Charlie, I want to borrow $100 for a year. And Charlie says, okay, I'll loan you $100, but I'm going to have to give you, you're going to have to pay me something for giving up the use of my $100 for a year. And this is what economists refer to as the basic rate. And historically, that's been about 3%. So at the end of the year, Charlie wants me to give him back $103. He wants to be paid $3 for giving up the use of his $100 for a year. Now, if he thinks there's some probability I'm not going to pay this loan off, he's going to add a risk premium. But Charlie knows I'm a riskless person, so he can put 0 down for that. However, if Charlie thinks there's going to be 3% inflation over the period of this loan, he's going to add to that 3% basic rate a 3% inflationary premium because he wants his $103 back in real purchasing power. So he's going to charge me a total of 6%. These are the components of the rate. Why did the prime rate get to 21.5% back here in 1981? Because the inflation rate was rocking along at 18.5%. And so what did lenders do? They took that 18.5% inflation rate, added on a 3% basic rate, and got the 21.5% interest rate they charge folks. Why have interest rates fallen so much over time? Because the Fed has done a great job of getting rid of inflation in our economy. And as a result, that inflationary premium component has squeezed down to almost nothing. As a matter of fact, if you look at the forecast of what is expected, here's that big increase in inflation back in the 80s. This is on an annual basis. At one point, it got to 18.5%. But on an annual basis, here's what's been happening, and here's what's expected to happen to inflation. It's expected to be almost just 1% this year and go down. You stay at around 1.3% going forward. And so as a result, when we look at the forecast for mortgage rates, we think mortgage rates are going to go down to basically historically low levels. And that's going to be, oh, by the way, before I show you the impact of that, I thought I'd mention one more COVID-19 alert. This may be very helpful to many of you, and that is, if you keep a glass of wine in each hand, you don't have to worry about accidentally touching your face. Very key COVID-19 alert. Now, these low interest rates, of course, are going to be very good for the housing market. This is a picture of housing starts and building permits kind of on top of each other. Housing starts are in blue here, but look what has happened here. First of all, you had the big drop in housing starts associated with the shutdown and from about mid-March through mid-June. But look what has happened in July. July popped all the way back up by 26.2%, almost back to where it was before. The low interest rates, more people working remotely from home, wanting to be in a nicer home, et cetera, has really impacted the housing starts area. If you look at housing sales, again, same thing, big old drop when everybody was locked up in their house, and then boom, in July, 25% increase almost. So you had the people that are earning $60,000 and more, they fell less during this time period. They recovered faster, lower mortgage rates, more working from home, boom. The home sales have really rocketed back up. And then the other thing that rocketed back up, another thing that people use interest rate, do borrowing to buy is the automobile. And as it turns out, this is very important to Alabama because you're among the top 5 states in the United States in terms of automobile production. You have 3 really big ones already working, Hyundai, Honda, and Mercedes-Benz. You have a $2.3 billion one under construction for Toyota and Mazda, just northwest of where you're located. And then you have 2 smaller ones. You have the auto car that makes a heavy truck and the New Flyer, which makes the electric bus. It's kind of amusing to me as a person who's watched economic development over time and to watch the reaction of people when you got your first plant here, the Mercedes-Benz plant. I remember when Alabama, you shoveled out an awful lot of money to get that plant, and a lot of people thought this was crazy. Oh my gosh, this turns out to be one of the best economic development things you folks ever did. Because once you got that, there's kind of a synergism around these plants, and 2 things happen. Number one, you get more plants like Hyundai and Honda and Toyota Mazda, but the other thing you have 150 tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers to the automobile industry in the state of Alabama. So a lot of jobs in your state associated with the automobile industry. Now, this is a picture of what happened to automobile production in the United States. And first thing you'll notice is this big drop that occurred in the first half of the year. There are 40 assembly plants in the United States, automobile assembly plants in the United States. 37 of them were completely closed. So you had a big drop. But look what has happened since then. Okay, once again, July, boom, you popped way back up and it's back on track again. If you look at sales, sales did the same thing. Big old drop that took place. This is this is quarterly data. So the first and second quarter, dropping down to levels of losses, sales losses we haven't seen since the Great Depression. But already popping back up, on its way back up. There's kind of 2 things that are going on here. One is people don't want to do mass transit so much anymore. That's helping build up the demand for cars. But on the other hand, there's going to be more remote work going on, it looks like now, which is causing the demand for cars to go down. So you're not really seeing, this is Wells Fargo's forecast, they're not really seeing this bounce back to where it was by the time you get through 2021. They don't have it bouncing back to where it was before we went into this downturn, but they do have it coming back pretty sharply, and that'll be good for the state of Alabama. So that's a quick look at what has been happening. I thought I would close by showing you this. This is the Chinese word for crisis. And boy, did we go into a crisis especially in the second quarter of this year. What's interesting about this word is made up of two symbols. One of those symbols means danger, but the other symbol means opportunity. I've been watching the economy for 4 decades. And one of the really cool things about where you live is the way you take danger, you take a crisis, and you turn it into an opportunity. I was asked a question at a meeting of a task force we have here in Louisiana. This person said, there's so much change going on. How in the world are we going to adapt to all these changes? Well, let me tell you something. Get down on your hands and knees tonight and thank God Almighty that you operate in the United States of America. Because if you operate in China, Russia, a lot of Europe, South America, the way you deal with danger is the government forms a committee. And the committee of people who may be good people, may be terrible people, but a committee of people sit down and they try to figure out on their own, gee, where should we put more resources? Where should we take resources away from? That's not the way it's done in the United States of America. In the United States of America, the changes all take place automatically and efficiently without anybody running it, because there's something out there called the market. And what happens is if we shift to some other area because of this COVID thing, more remote stuff from home, there's going to be an increase in the price of all things associated with that. Resources will automatically gravitate to where there's more demand, where that price is highest. There's going to be areas where the demand is not as important anymore. Maybe driving on roads, okay? We need to take resources away. Resources will automatically move away from that area to this area simply by following where the price goes. If it goes up, it goes down, that's where resources will go without anybody running it. It's just automatic. And it's one of the most wonderful things about living in the United States of America. How lucky we are. I've enjoyed talking with you folks today. Charlie, I think that's about it.
Well, thanks so much, Dr. Scott. And I appreciate all the comments, but particularly those at the end. We talk about this a lot. Whatever normal ultimately looks like for our community, I know that the communities we serve, we've seen it already. We have people that are going to have the will to make the best of it, and find an opportunity to prosper in all this.
Right.
And for everybody on the line, we're recording this call, and it's August 27th. Dr. Scott is in Baton Rouge. Hurricane Laura came through last night. He looks good and has survived it well, and we're thankful for that. And so glad you are well.
Yeah,
but our wish from everyone here at the bank is that we just stay healthy and safe. We've got responsibilities to each other through this. We will reach the end of this at some point. I'm an optimist, a big optimist in that regard, to be honest. And I think if there's a need that can be filled for the bank, for anybody that sees this, or that, I just hope you think of us. We stand ready to serve. Dr. Scott, once again, thanks so much. You helped us with our summit last year. The people that will be viewing you and seeing this online have been a big part of growing it to date. We look forward to getting back in real life again, I think, in 2021. And and we're going to be pleased to get there. And I think everybody will be doing just fine. So Dr. Scott, thank you.
I hope I get to come back to Gunnerville sometime. It was a great
trip. We'll look forward to it. Thanks so
All right.
much. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.